Well, could former Congressman Matt Gaetz face criminal charges here in Central Florida for those allegations that were outlined in the House Ethics Report? As we reported in the last block, the Orange County Sheriff's Office, the Seminole County Sheriff's Office both tell us that that is unlikely, at least at this time. Talking about statute of limitations being expired for a number of the allegations, and then also no victim coming forward to them in a couple of the other allegations. Joining us live now via Zoom is Jose Rivas, a criminal defense attorney. Jose, always appreciate you joining us here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Pleasure to be here.
So when we hear this about the statute of limitations, just kind of talk to folks about what that is, what that means when the investigators say they can't press charges because of that, what that means.
When we talk about a statute of limitation, we're talking about the time, the amount of time. For example, for prostitution, it's a first-degree misdemeanor. The state or the government has only 2 years to initiate formal charges. What happened in this case is that a longer time has lapsed, and therefore it's too late to come forward and bring charges against the individual who allegedly committed the crime.
And these statutes of limitations, it varies depending on what the potential crime is. Can you kind of take us through, you said prostitution is 2 years. Can you kind of take us through how that varies for different categories of potential crimes?
Yes, for a third-degree felony, it's typically punishable up to 5 years in prison or probation. The statute of limitation for that is 3 years. For example, for a statutory rape, that's a second-degree felony, which is punishable up to 15 years. But for a second-degree felony, the statute of limitations is 4 years. Therefore, the investigation and the charges must be brought forth within the 4 years of when the crime occurred.
Why is there a statute of limitations in place? Why are there these kind of deadlines for things like this to be filed? Is there? I would imagine there has to be a reason for that.
Well, these are not first-degree felonies. For example, in first-degree felonies, those that are punished that resulted in death or punishable by life, there is no statute of limitations. So what we want to do is we want to, initiate. We want victims to come forward, and we want to prosecute crimes, during the time that we can get some information, we can recuperate the evidence, so we can prosecute. The issue is when there's no limitation, no statute of limitations, it could delay the process. Evidence disappears, witnesses don't come forward. So it's part of like encouraging the system to come forward and have some kind of limitation so people don't come back 10, 20 years later and want to press charges.
So as a criminal defense attorney, then hearing this, that Gaetz will not be facing charges here in Central Florida, I'm sure that does not surprise you then, with your knowledge of the law.
Right. We always say that, the truth does not matter. What matters is whether the state or the government can prove it. When you read this report, you hear a lot of substantial evidence, and you see that those two words, numerous times, substantial evidence that he committed these crimes. But that's not the standard. To be able to prosecute someone has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a lot higher than substantial evidence. Might be enough for a civil action, for a lawsuit, but it's not enough in a criminal justice courtroom.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the kind of different thresholds there, because we know that was one of the arguments that former Congressman Gaetz was making in kind of defending himself from the allegations in this report, was saying that yes, the ethics committee is claiming I did these things based on kind of their reading of the evidence, but obviously it did not reach the level of charges because there is a kind of a different standard that these prosecutors would have to meet in a case like this.
And again, we go back to the theory that the truth doesn't matter. It could have happened, maybe it didn't happen. The question is, can the state or the government prove it beyond a reasonable doubt? And when you come to the federal system, they have a very high conviction rate, 97, 98% conviction rate. They don't want to take a case they cannot prove, waste the resources. This has been a long investigation. And beyond a reasonable doubt, that's the system that we have. It's not perfect, but it works very well. And again, we don't want an innocent man to be convicted if the state cannot prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, which is, again, a very high standard.
Is there a statute of limitations or something like that when we're talking about potential civil action, like you mentioned, that we could see in something like this?
There is a civil. It depends on the crime, but there is civil, whether it's a breach of contract, and I think that's you can hear a little bit of that language in the report where they're saying that the attorneys are still going to move forward with civilly. Again, we saw this in the O.J. Simpson case, very popular back in the 90s, where they can still move forward civilly, just not enough in a criminal courtroom. But again, civil is just, we're talking about money, we're talking about damages, we're not talking about the loss of freedom.
Now, what is the bottom line here to your kind of response to folks who may find it outrageous in some ways that Gaetz wouldn't face potential criminal charges over these allegations?
It's part of the system. Obviously he's got some great lawyers standing next to him who's been able to manipulate the system or being able to delay some information. And again, when we talk about prosecuting, we talk about being able to prove the crime. Just because they can't prove it, they can't charge, does not mean that he's innocent. Sometimes the state will drop a case because they don't have the witnesses available, they don't have the information, and people say, I'm innocent. That doesn't make you innocent. That just means that you have not been found guilty of a crime. But doesn't mean that, outside the courtroom, that you're innocent or that the crime did not occur. Again, the truth does not matter. What matters is whether the state can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, criminal defense attorney Jose Rivas. Well, you always appreciate your expertise. You do a great job explaining that stuff and breaking it down for us. So thanks for joining us this morning here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Thank you.